Good evening. I'd like to call the joint meeting of the Morristown Selectboard and the Village Trustees to order. Do we have any agenda changes or additions?
No.
No. Do we have any community comments? No one in the audience? No one online? Okay.
Sorry, I'm gonna call the village meeting, the village trustee meeting to order, and it's 5:30. Thank you.
Okay, good evening and welcome. This is the Morristown Village Trustees and Select Board's first public hearing on the proposed changes to the zoning and subdivision bylaws. The Planning Commission has completed its hearing process and sent the proposed amendments along with its report and recommendations to the Select Board on June 1st, 2026. Before we begin public comment, I want to briefly explain how tonight will work. This is a public hearing, so our role is to listen. Anyone is welcome to speak. Please state your name and your address for the record. Written comments are also welcome. We are interested in what your support and what concerns you and what you think might need adjustment. After public comment, the board and the trustees have several options under state law. We can make minor changes and move toward adoption. If larger changes are needed, we would need to hold a second public hearing, and we can also continue this hearing to a later date if more time or information is needed without rewarning it. We may choose to reject some or all of the proposed amendments. If no action is taken within the required time frame, the amendments are considered rejected and the current bylaws stay in place. If there's a specific issue that needs immediate attention, the Select Board can also adopt a temporary interim bylaw, which can stay in effect for up to 2 years while a permanent solution is developed. These options are flexible, and we may act on some items while continuing to work on others. Our goal is to make sure these bylaws reflect the needs of our community. I'm going to invite our zoning administrator to give a brief high-level overview of the proposed zoning bylaws and changes. And when he's done, I'll open the floor up to the board and the trustees for comments. And then after that, we'll let the public comment. And with that, Tyler.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Members of the trustees, members of the select board. Thanks for having me here tonight. For those of you who haven't met me before, my name is Tyler Misha. I'm a zoning and planning administrator. I've been in my position now for a little over a year, so it's great to be here tonight. Most of you have seen, I have presented this twice to the trustees and once to the select board prior to this hearing. So I will try and be brief, as I know you guys have seen this before, and just kind of hit some of the high notes this time. One thing I will note in the packet that you'll see there is I did make minor edits to the document after it was approved by the Planning Commission. Those are found in the packet dated in the memos dated from 4/30. It runs over a series of minor edits that range from grammatical changes, spelling, punctuation, that sort of thing. And it identifies where those are in the document. No substantive changes have been made to this document since it's been approved by the Planning Commission. So we're going to run through is one general thing you'll note throughout the document is that it was renumbered and reformatted entirely to kind of create a systematic way of numbering sequence throughout the document. The original document jumped around a lot, had a lot of different styles of numbering depending on where it was. So this was just done for uniformity. First big section that was changed was section 204 E. That is the use section. And basically what was done to that, there were a lot of some uses that were added to it and changed around. The biggest changes that you'll note is the changes regarding dwelling units. So dwelling unit, single family is no longer a permitted use in the state. Anywhere you have a single family home by right, you're allowed a duplex. So the use table was changed to reflect that. Also dwelling units 3 and 4 units are also a by right use in areas that are served by municipal water and sewer. So you can have up to 4 units of housing inside of what would be a single family home, and I would treat it the same as I would a single family home. You'll also note that multiple principal uses on a lot was added to the use table. That was done to codify a way for us to permit multiple principal uses and multiple principal buildings on the same lot, which currently we don't while we have in practice, we do not have a way to permit in the bylaw, so this just codifies how we do that. It ranges, we'll get into more detail on that when we get to that section. Sorry, I'm shuffling between the share and that, so. Let me see. So there was some significant changes that were made to section 420. Section 420 deals with a lot of optional things in state statute. It references a section of state law that gives municipality a little bit of flexibility in choosing things, but the problem was our original section just referenced that section, but it didn't say one way or the other what position we wanted to take on those particular items. So we went through and we took positions on that, and that was based on feedback from our legal team. Section 510 was completely changed. And was basically section 510 right now has our conservation subdivision regulations. Those still exist. The content of that section has simply been moved to another section of the bylaw, to the subdivision section of the bylaw. And section 510 was replaced with the principal structures and principal uses on the lot. So basically what that does. So it highlights the various districts that it's allowed in. It's restricted for basically most of the purely residential districts. And what it says in a nutshell is that if all the uses in a building are permitted uses, the DRB doesn't have to approve, and you want to add another permitted use. The DRB doesn't approve the use, but it would approve the site plan, right? So that would make sure that parking is adequate, screening of trash, those sorts of things, traffic flow, all that sort of stuff. So if you introduce a new use, we want to make sure that if that use necessitates additional parking, additional lighting, rechanging traffic flow, that those types of things are captured. It does also clarify that if one of the uses inside of the building is a conditional use, then that use would be reviewed as a conditional use. But once it's approved, any subsequent changes to the site will just require a site plan amendment. So it's trying to strike a balance between, you know, giving some flexibility to developers and not necessarily requiring every building with multiple principal uses to go to the DR, to get the uses approved. But it recognizes that some of those changes and uses could necessitate, you know, have a greater impact in the neighborhood communities. We want to make sure that the public had the opportunity to participate in that through a public hearing process. Section 511, this is a new section of the bylaw. And what it was added was to codify and make some changes to our short-term rental regulations. The substance of the regulation itself, of our short-term rental regulations, weren't changed, but it simply was some clarity was added to it, because the short-term rental regulations as they sit today are not in the regulation section of the bylaw. They're in the definition section. So what this does was to remove the substantive part from the definition section, brought it into the bylaw and added some clarity. So essentially what it did was it clarified that the short-term rentals for fewer rooms does not require a permit for the use, but the building that the uses that the units are in does require a permit. Because the way it was written, you could interpret it as saying that if it's 4 or fewer, the whole building doesn't need a permit, which isn't the intent. So that was done to just to make some changes to that and to clarify that the building itself does need a permit. And also to note that if it's between 5 and 8 units, that type of short-term rental does require approval by the DRB. If it's 9 or more bedrooms that get rented out, that becomes an inn or a hotel, and it's a different use at that point. Section 660 was removed from the bylaw. This allowed the DRB to review and approve certain sections, to administer sections of Act 250 locally. The reason that this was done is that if you opt to do that, state law requires you to follow something called the Municipal Administrative Procedures Act, or MAPA, which is extremely onerous to follow, very difficult to administer. It's treated as if it's a civil court procedure. So the way that you approach writing it is very, very, very litigious, and we just I don't have the capacity to do it, the DRB doesn't really have the capacity to do it sort of properly, so we opted to not do it, so. Because that's what the practice had been currently. There were some significant changes made to section 710. Which clarified, added more definitions to what makes a major and a minor subdivision. In short, 3 lots, 1 original lot, 2 parent lots is a minor subdivision. 4 lots, 1 original lot, 3 new lots or more is a major subdivision. We also made changes to section 720, which establishes a 3-step review process for major subdivisions, which brings us along to what most municipalities do with that. Our current process combines everything into one. It takes sketch plan review, which is really an optional process that isn't supposed to be mandatory or binding. It kind of makes it mandatory and binding, which isn't really anywhere since state statute. So rather than do that, we opted to go with a more traditional format, which is sketch plan review, which is optional. Preliminary subdivision review, which is a public hearing, where we have an initial crack at the application, and then final subdivision reviews where we pick up any loose pieces for final before final approval. Section 740 was most of the old section 510, which is the conservation subdivision language that was just put in a different location. Most of that substance was from 510 remains in there and wasn't changed, it was reordered. And then lastly, there was definitional changes that were made in section 900 that if the board or anybody wants to go into more detail, we can. I do have one last substantive change that I believe all the members here have tonight, which Kevin Petrocco, who's our lister, raised an interesting point. It just kind of came up spontaneously through me reviewing an application, and that he expressed some concern about the ability for the listers to capture demolitions or renovations to structures that could potentially impact their value. And what we were able to come up with was a compromise which kept what the spirit of this is, which is to basically say if you're maintaining the existing structure, you can do so provided the structure isn't expanded or changed or moved or relocated. So if a structure is so compromised, be it through fire, insect damage, what have you, you can restore it to its original condition without requiring a permit, provided that you document. This is what it looks like. This is what's going back there. So if I may, I'm just going to read through the text of this because this is brand new for everybody. So starting in A, structures may be demolished in whole or in part and rebuilt to the same exterior dimensions, footprint, volume, height, and elevations as the original structure without first obtaining a permit. Applicants / landowners should document the existing structure prior to the demolition to help ensure that the renovations match the exterior dimensions, footprint, volume, height, and elevations of the original structure prior to the demolition. In all demolition shall comply, and we do need to make an additional change there with, instead of the crossed out meet, with the standards noted in section 206 and 207, which is our design review criteria and our historic preservation criteria, if that applies to the building. Failure to provide documentation, if requested, will require the applicant to submit a zoning permit application. Relocating the structure or enlarging in any way will require a zoning permit. Routine maintenance of a property shall not result in new obstructions to flood flows or impaired drainage, or have the potential to be substantial improvements as noted in sections 330 of the bylaws. Section 330 is our flood hazard regulations. That's to comply with NFIP standards, which state if you have a property that's substantially damaged, which is 50% or more of the current market value of the structure, that requires approval by the Development Review Board prior to being able to fix it. So that's just keeping us in compliance with NFIP regs. Maintenance of existing paths, recreational areas, stormwater drainage areas, roads, bridges, culverts, boardwalks, or channel management activities is exempt from needing a zoning permit, provided there's no relocation or enlargement of the area, height, volume, or footprint of the above mentioned items. Stormwater drainage areas and culverts may be enlarged without a zoning permit as necessary to mitigate hazards to the public. And provide the public provided notification of their enlargement. Prior to or in conjunction with the work, and this is to address Kevin's concerns. The applicant or landowner shall contact the lister's office to inform them of the work being done. That's to allow them to make sure that the property is taxed for the appropriate value. To make sure that, if there's any question about whether or not something is or is not maintenance, this section gives me, section D gives me the authority to reserve the right to require a landowner to seek a permit at their sole discretion should they feel the work or activity in question is not merely maintenance, but constitutes development such that obtaining a zoning permit is in the best interest of the town's health, safety, and welfare. So it's trying to strike a balance between recognizing that people may need to repair their homes and flood, fire, or otherwise. We don't really want to require permitting, but it's trying to strike a balance to be sure that that's codified in some way. So provided that the homeowner can document in some way that, prior to demolition, they take photos of the house or are able to pull up an old MLS listing, say, this is what I'm replacing. If you can show that to me and I could see that that's what's being built back, that shouldn't require a permit. But if there's any question, I do have the authority to just say it's not maintenance, it needs a permit. So if there's any questions. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Kevin, does that cleans up anything from your point of view on that, right? That cleans that up. Because all the other bylaws that were summarized, we've already had an opportunity to take a look at. Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
figure I'd just make myself available here if there's any follow-up
Okay.
questions for me.
Richard, I do
regarding
have a
the,
question
Okay.
after.
All right. I think he's just there just in case he wants to say something. All right. With that, I'll open it up to the board and the trustees for comment.
Tyler, I just, one clarification, what you just read, the 435 maintenance, very much mirrors what was in the existing document that was approved after the planning commission hearing and the select board at our meeting. So we've approved the majority of that language, with the exception of C, which talks about the applicant or landowner should contact the lister's office to inform them the work being done. So that's the major change,
That is correct. There was some.
but it's not, it's a minor change to address that issue.
Minor changes clarifying you had compliance. I wasn't expecting somebody to give me documentation, but that they should have it available. Should I want to ask to basically say, take photos, keep it for your records, so that way, if somebody asks me whether or not John Smith needed a permit to repair his house.
You can just speak in the mic.
Okay, so Tyler, I would like to make two very minor edit suggestions. 1, 2, 3. In the third line in A, applicant's landowner should document the existing structure. I would suggest we say shall document the existing structure, which makes it clear that they shall do that. And that, because that complies with the standards as noted. And I would say in the last sentence of that paragraph A, failure to provide documentation if requested will require the applicant to submit a zoning permit application. I suggest we strike if requested because they do need to have that documentation available.
My response to that would be is part of also the intent of this section is to codify what is our current practice and is the practice of numerous other municipalities of our size, which is to not require any permitting for maintenance of structures. So if there's no permitting, there wouldn't be anything to submit because there's no application. So what this is trying to do is that they should take pictures of this, because generally it's not going to be required unless somebody questions whether or not something's maintenance. And if an applicant or a property owner is undergoing that work, that's when I would come to them or you and say, Leah, do you have document? I know you made repairs to your house. Did you document the changes that you made? So that way I can make sure it's maintenance. And it's important to remember that the town, as you know, has one person doing zoning and planning and stuff like that, so. This is trying to strike a balance between giving flexibility to property owners while maintaining a little bit of accountability, but recognizing that I don't have the administrative capacity to. I get a lot of maintenance requests, so I just don't have the capacity to issue permits or track or keep track of all that stuff. So this is more of a informing the applicant what would be property and what would be expected of them. So in the event that they need to repair the property.
Understand noted, as a layperson, if requested gives me the potential of an out, where if it's struck, it means I know I'm going to have to provide documentation if asked. So it makes it extremely clear to me as a layperson reading this,
Yeah.
that documentation would be required if there's any questions. That's why I make that suggestion.
At the end of the day, these are your bylaws. So if you would like to make those changes, I would just point out again, just reiterate the fact that it's a one-person department and I have to be judicious with the amount of time that I have to dedicate to the various tasks that I have. I do think that if requested, it kind of cues in the property owner that they should have that and document it. And then if they don't, they're kind of rolling the dice a little bit with that. And again, if this becomes problematic, we could certainly revisit it in future rewrites, but I was trying to strike that balance with this change.
Yeah, my hope is not to have to revisit.
I'd like to make the point that I agree with what Leah is suggesting. And along with that, maybe you could define what you expect for documentation, a couple of bullets, maybe would keep you from, fighting a battle of, okay, I said document it, but you did this. Well, do you have something that kind of gives you that guidance, so it's standard?
My response to that is that if I'm not requesting stuff with them, it can be difficult to start to kind of get into the weeds with that. So this is to try and be somewhat loose and leave it up to my discretion. What I feel I need is sufficient enough to document the maintenance, because currently right now, there's no documentation required at all. And that's, to be fair, that's not uncommon among municipalities. So this is trying to strike that balance with, you should have something, be it photos, or what I imagine most people would take photos. If they fail to do that, then that does open them up to that. So it's trying to strike that compromise and also respect what, Kevin's very legitimate concerns are, is that somebody could do a substantial upgrade to a building under maintenance, which would change its tax value, but wouldn't necessarily trigger a zoning permit, because any new construction, I always give Kevin a copy of the permit as I'm required to by state law. So it's important to, again, at the end of the day, these are your bylaws. But I feel that, having that it's a good compromise between requiring permitting for remodels while also making sure that we're documenting in some way, or people are aware that they should keep track of these changes, shouldn't invent that they get questioned.
I have one further question regarding section 435 maintenance under B. There's a sentence that reads, stormwater drainage areas and culverts may be enlarged without a zoning permit as necessary to mitigate hazards to the public, provided notification of their enlargement. And that sentence to me feels incomplete because it doesn't say to whom they should notice, but I also question if we need to include it, because I believe that aspect is covered in a different section, and I believe it's section 330 flood hazard provisions, and that would catch anything about stormwater changes, and that's referenced in a memo from Ron.
Yep, so section 430, 330 was what you're referencing, is a flood hazard overlay district regs. That only applies in the flood hazard overlay district. So we have other stormwater infrastructure, be it box culverts or other things on other subdivisions, which aren't in the flood hazard overlay district, but may need to be repaired in the event of damage. The town I used to work for in Richmond, in 23 and 24 floods underwent significant damage to a lot of its town, both public and private infrastructure that was outside of the flood hazard overlay district, but was a lot of like an area, say like Coat Hill Road or that area. So this is giving people the ability to say, rather than to do a one-to-one replacement of a culvert, if there's an opportunity to upgrade a culvert to increase capacity or things like that to protect the future washout of that, we didn't want to make sure that didn't require a permit. So it's explicitly stating that.
But then you're asking them to provide notification to whom?
In this section, it would be me. So would I think you could, if you wanted to add to the zoning administrator or highway superintendent, I think that would be an appropriate add.
Would it open the town up because you're requiring notification if no permitting is needed? And it's not something that the town installed or owned and is on the landowner's property, but yet you're asking notification. Does it not open up per Ron that it may extend beyond previously permitted infrastructure? And if it's outside the flood area zone, it wasn't part of a permitted development to begin with, why would the town want to insert itself?
We're not inserting ourselves so much as we're just saying we'd want to document what's there, because typically those types of pieces of infrastructure would be reviewed by the Development Review Board as part of that site plan review process if it's a major subdivision. We just want to make sure that we're documenting what's being done on those words in case there's any questions or stuff like that also. And it's also just trying to make clear that if Jordan needs to upgrade something, that doesn't require him to get a permit, even to say, Tyler, I'm upgrading this. So that way it's just, there's no question about that.
I think it's having the town take on responsibility. We are asking for notification of it when it's not our responsibility. And so it's adding a responsibility to the town. So I question including that sentence, and I'm doing that based on information that consultant Ron, and I'm sorry, I don't remember
Yep.
his last name.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that again, because those types of infrastructure, if you were to install them new, would require a permit. So this is saying if your road is washed out, you have an existing culvert, you're washing it, you're replacing a piece of infrastructure with a better piece of infrastructure. That doesn't require a permit, because if it meets the definition of land development, which includes excavation, we don't want to catch that up. I don't want to hold somebody up from, if they have the opportunity to upgrade something, right, because it's damaged or washed out, that they don't have to put, do a like-to-like replacement, because clearly what's there wasn't working.
Yeah, I'm not questioning having them do a replacement. That's great. I'm questioning the need of the town being included in the loop.
We would be, regardless if they were installing it new, that would require, at least in many cases, a permit by me. So this is simply saying that in the event of you need to replace existing infrastructure, you don't need to come to me to get a permit to replace a culvert. If upgrading the culvert's protecting the public interest, you just need to notify me that you're doing it.
Just for clarifications, I think that was Ron's recommendation, was that we clarify the language such that if it was an existing permitted stormwater, that would be where we would be notified. If it wasn't something that was permitted initially by the town, then that would be where we might be putting ourselves as being perceived to be responsible for drainage or culverts or infrastructure that we had not initially permitted and hadn't been involved in.
I would say if you wanted clarification on legal liability, I would recommend taking that to the town attorney, just a sense, because Ron's good, he's not an attorney either, to see whether or not that would apply. However, if you're asking my opinion, if you made a change to that I would not be opposed to a change that clarifies that. That's saying that if it's existing culverts and stuff and other infrastructure that you want to replace or upgrade, that doesn't need a permit. that would be, I don't have any strong objections to that. Again, the goal with this, is to try and make it as easy as possible for people to take advantage of, you know, a road being washed out or stuff like that, to build it back better, quicker, without me having to get in the way of trying to issue a permit and slow. Because again, I have 30 days to review and approve any permit application that I receive, especially this time of the year. It's not uncommon for me to have anywhere from 6 to 12 applications in at any given time. So if we're waiting for somebody to permit something, it could be washed out in May or June, and it could be, you know, if they decide they want to put a culvert in where one didn't exist, you could be talking, you know, not an insignificant amount of time before they could fix that. Whereas if they could come in and fix it, get everything back up and running, you know, most of the time, you know, provided the road's in the same, you know, it's in the same place. If you take the road and move it 100 yards away, well, that's not the same thing, right? But if you're taking existing road and you say you're taking a 24-inch culvert, and making it a 36-inch culvert, I think we should allow that, just to, you know, so that way we lessen the burden on the property owner for repairing the property.
So is your concern with just the notification piece, or is it with the,
Um,
because I kind of think that if my culvert washes out, I shouldn't have to go get a permit to make my driveway passing.
I'm going to read directly from Ron's statement. One option is to revise a sentence to specify that notification is directed to the zoning administrator and limit the scope to stormwater infrastructure that was part of a previously permitted development, i.e. Subdivision stormwater systems, permitted access drainage, section 330 facilities. Or his other option was to delete the enlargement sentence entirely and rely on the existing section 330 flood hazard provisions and the ZA, zoning administrator catch-all, to handle cases where stormwater changes generally need town review. If the enlargement is in the flood hazard area, section 435B already requires it not to create a substantial improvement. If it's outside the flood hazard area and was never part of a permitted development, the town arguably does not need to be in the loop. The downstream landowner's remedy is a civil action, not a zoning enforcement matter.
So yeah, we're not recommending that we increase the number of permits, just kind of clarify where the responsibility is. If Tom Smith never got a permit for the culvert in his driveway and needs to replace it, he wouldn't need a permit anyway, but also the town was never involved in issuing a permit. And thus that was Ron's concern about then saying if they needed to notify the town, not that we issue more permits, but where is it actually necessary to be notified, given we're not going to issue a permit? If that helps clarify.
No, it does. Again, I think my concern would just be, again, if you have, it's trying to strike the balance between wanting to document stuff. Because again, if you have a road that doesn't have culverts in it, and somebody in the course of repairing decides to put in a culvert to alleviate flow, technically that's not maintenance, because that culvert wasn't there. And sometimes at the DRB, especially if a project requires site plan approval by the DRB, you start putting in stormwater or other infrastructure, that gets the DRB involved in certain circumstances. So we want to avoid that. I think just explicitly saying that, again, if you're going to take the opportunity to upsize something, I don't think I should get in the way of you upsizing.
Okay, so then based on that, then the suggestion would be to amend that statement so that stormwater drainage areas and culverts may be enlarged without a zoning permit as necessary to mitigate hazards to the public, provided notification of their enlargement to the zoning administrator. Duly noted the limits on your time due to the demand. All right, so I think that's all I have.
Just that zone to the zoning administrator.
Yeah, so changing should to shall in section A, and I still feel we should strike if requested. And that clarification of the notification to the zoning administrator would be the edits that I suggest. That's it for 435 for me.
So should to shall
Should to shall.
after landowner.
And the second to last statement in section A no, last statement, failure to provide documentation will require the applicant to submit a zoning permit application.
What changed to that?
I struck if requested.
Okay, all right.
That would be the thing that I would strongly disagree with. I do feel very strongly that, you know, because again, if it's not optional, like if they say they have to do it, I now have to take it, codify it, and that would come for us, roof improvements, anything like that. I get quite a few of those. So I would have significant, if you had concerns about anything, I would, you know, the stormwater drainage thing, if you wanted to cut that, which you see more minimal to do, you could do that. And I would strongly encourage that you keep, if requested, to allow me that flexibility to do it, not require it, because that's what you're essentially doing with that. This is requiring permits for maintenance.
Brent Raymond, town manager. So I just want to make sure we're all reading this the same way. That section that she's saying shall require. That's only if they fail to provide documentation. So that's sort of more, making it more concrete that if they don't provide documentation, that it will be required. So I want to make sure we're all interpreting that correctly. That's the way I interpret it. And I've had a long week, so I might be interpreting it incorrectly, and I just got this afternoon. But I don't think that unless they don't document, they're not required. So I don't want, and if I'm wrong, you know, feel free to.
Makes changes.
So you gotta stand up with comments, people can.
Can't head for Morristown. The problem I'm having is you're saying. Document it, but you don't have to. If I decide I'm gonna change out some deck boards and have documented, my neighbor's like, hey, he did work. And I don't give you pictures. Now you're gonna make me get a zoning permit for 2 deck boards they changed out on a weak deck. That's, you know, I see what you're saying. Like. I think that's the point that's trying to be made is if you don't tell them document it and then someone raises concern, now you have to say, hey. I need documentation and they say, I didn't take pictures. Now you have to get a zoning permit. So. That I see it's concern, I'm just.
I'd like to support what Leah has suggested in 435A. Around should, shall, be, shall. And I guess I need to think more about if requested. As well as, but then further down, the routine maintenance is just that needs to be revisited, whether it's without attorney. In my opinion, of course, or further conversation with Ron. Because I agree with that gentleman. If we leave 435 the way it is, it's an unintentional gotcha. If we don't tell them you shall, and then we come back after the fact and say, you know what, you should have. That feels like exactly what this gentleman said. We didn't tell them they needed to, so they didn't, and now we say, oh, you should have. I support Leah. So if you're looking for, does the board support this? I want to say that I am on board with the support of looking at changes here.
And I would say should shall is it's a minor change. I don't,
Again, I would just stress with that is that the should shall, it seems minor, but I would worry about, because right now we don't require any documentation for maintenance or renovations that don't result in you changing the footprint of the building. So by requiring that, right, that's going to be a big change. How, because the fact that if I require you now to give me permit, because right now you don't need any documentation at all. Basically, like you say, if you're maintaining something that's existing, if you're remodeling your deck, you're not making it bigger, you're not making it smaller, you want to tear it completely off and rebuild it exactly the same, that doesn't require a permit.
I don't believe that Lee is asking that to be made into a permit. And saying to this gentleman right here was taking off 5 feet of board. To say, take 3 pictures, so in case somebody does come and ask you,
Okay,
I've got the 3 pictures.
I'm a little
If you-
sleep deprived myself.
Yeah.
I think
And that, I think
Yeah.
this gentleman captured the idea, thank you. That I believe, I won't speak for Lee,
No,
but
you're correct.
my translation is that's exactly what we're trying to avoid. So some poor guy that just is doing minor work, doesn't take his phone out, take 3 pictures and ignore it. Until somebody says, hey, and then he goes, I got the 3 pictures. And
Right.
this kind of leaves him stuck. Because we didn't say shall. If you can come up with some other word that, or wording that strongly suggests, not should, but says, take the pictures, we may never ask for them, but take them. That's what I'm looking for out of that. That's my concern.
And my apologies, Leah, like I said, I didn't quite get that that's what you were getting at, but yes, that's okay, again, I'm just trying to avoid me having to require permits and stuff.
Understandable. We want to make it easy for them to replace it.
So.
Yeah, we're at 87 Fairwood Parkway West, work as a lister here, assistant assessor. I do just want to add, and Tyler summarized it perfectly about my concerns, and I got to apologize, they're really kind of late in the game. I just came to the realization about 4:35 that there would be this gap in knowledge for the listers department. To his credit, crafting up section C here, I think that's a really important aspect of this. Because prior to or in conjunction with the work, the applicant or landowner shall contact the lister's office to inform them of the work being done. When it comes to documenting how a house is already at, we're the best place to do that. We've got sketches, we've got a lot of measurements. I think it's a great opportunity for us, working closely as we do together, to step in, perhaps do a drive-by, check it matches our records, document it.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's a possibility right there.
Yeah, I think it's great.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, are there any other comments from trustees? Any other comments from the public? Jerry?
Jerry Thrun, Morrisville. So I just want to make sure, I thought I was pretty clear, but until Kevin just explained his concern, I want to make sure that we as homeowners, the town, and including the listers, are not going to be overburdened by what the language is, whatever the final language is here. I can just see Kevin getting 50 phone calls a day. I'm replacing a board on my deck. In fact, I have several boards to replace. Am I going to have to notify Kevin about it? Does he really want to hear from me? I think that what he really wants to know is if there's any improvement being made that would change the dimensions. I mean, if the building burns down and someone wants to rebuild their building, well, they're going to rebuild it to the same dimensions and everything. Otherwise, they're going to have to get a permit. So once it's rebuilt to the same dimensions, same volume, isn't it worth the same amount of money? Why would that change value of the property?
He's got an answer. Let's
Okay,
let Kevin answer that.
That's one thing, but okay, so like if I need to re-roof my house, which I probably will have to do in a couple of years. I need to notify Kevin. I don't need a permit according to the way this is written right now. But I have to notify him, and he's going to come out and determine if it is something that he needs to reassess the house for. It just seems like an awful lot of work. Okay, that's the first concern, which you can address as you like. The second concern is the use of the words stormwater drainage areas. And the way it's written now is completely different than the way it was written before, because before it said that you would not need a zoning permit provided there was no relocation or enlargement of the area, height, volume, or footprint of above mentioned items. Stormwater drainage areas and culverts may be enlarged with, okay, I'm sorry. So it was the same. Stormwater drainage areas and culverts may be enlarged without a zoning permit. So here's the concern about the enlargement of a stormwater drainage area. So when I hear stormwater drainage area, I'm thinking in engineering terms. That it's an area that rain falls on, and depending upon the surface and the nature of it, if it's a hard surface, if it's an impervious surface, if it's a gravel surface, if it's a grass surface, they all have different amounts that they absorb water. And so an engineer calculates what the area is that will be impacted by rainwater and the intensity, and determines from that what size culvert is necessary to control that water. So if that's not what this is intended, I mean, I don't think you want somebody coming in and maybe they have a half-acre drainage area and they're going to change the contours on their property and they're going to wind up with an acre and a half. I don't think that's their responsibility. I think they should have an engineer design that culvert. If that's not what's intended, if stormwater drainage area is not as I described, then it needs to be defined in the definitions. Because the other thing I could envision that this means is the stormwater retention basin areas that are put in to withhold water and slowly release it after a storm. Those are my concerns.
I've got a question. You know, we're talking about, you know, your concern. Is your concern primarily the demolition and rebuild of the
Yes,
same footprint,
Yeah.
but luxury appointments inside that would change the value?
yeah.
And
it must have-
therefore, would C be better under A as a, like, A3 or something? Because that notifying the lister's office, are you just talking about the demolition scenario?
No, I'm.
Or-
I'm
or all of
back up
this?
here because I do want to clarify that.
Oh,
So thank
okay.
you and thank you for pointing that out. My concern did not come from somebody's going to put on a new roof, somebody's going to put in a new kitchen. My concern, what kind of raised a possible flag with me early on, which I feel has been addressed, would be the full demolition of a house, rebuilding of the house to the same sizes. But I mean, take a 1940 ranch, 1,000 square feet, you know, light on insulation in the walls, old wiring, old everything. And if somebody had the option to rebuild a 1,000 square foot ranch with 2026 specs and of good quality, and we had no way of knowing about it, I felt it wouldn't be equitable process. As a listers department, we work so closely with zoning right now and in getting permits and knowing about when things are done, that I was afraid that that would create a blind spot for us in assessment. Not fair to everybody else in town. So the provision here in C really related more, and if it needs to be moved, I mean, you guys can certainly discuss that more for clarity. I do like the language of it because in the case of a full demolition and rebuild, it gives us the opportunity to at least document what was there, know about it, be driving by, you know, still without a permit because it's meeting the size standards of before, but then fairly assessing them if it needs to be changed down the road.
But you don't want notice of the two boards being replaced on the deck.
I'm not as concerned about that. I mean, but we do have, you know, great sketches and, you know, unless somebody has done something already without a permit, or even something that predates zoning. In the reassessments that we've had over the years, things have been documented. I've got great systems of past measurements and sketches, so it wouldn't be hard to document, put a pin in time, what this house is right now, and kind of eliminate any questions later, I think, from people.
So that's really the spirit of this, in your opinion, is to just like for like replacement, not replacing a damaged deck board or painting or putting a new roof on. Right, that's
Correct. Yeah, an extensive remodel
Mhm.
It was my greater concern than a
Right.
maintenance or a minor thing.
Brent, town manager, so 435A is specific to demolition.
Mhm.
B moves on beyond demolition, C as well. So Carl's point, it might be better to move C up into A.
Make it number 3 of A.
Yeah, and that way it's very clear that you are notified in instances of demolitions, not for any applicant or landowner contacting you for any work being done.
The only concern I have with Brett's comment, I think it's all great, is now that I look at the title of the section, it's maintenance. But in fact, the first section is demolition, not maintenance. So that in some ways is counterproductive because we go right into structures may be demolished. That's an odd maintenance job.
Well, I think the way I was looking at it, and I take a fairly broad view of maintenance, again, if a property is so damaged that the only way to maintain it is to destroy it and rebuild it back the way that it was, right? That is why I use that term to make it more broad and encompassing.
But help me, I'm the lay land owner, and I sure as heck don't look at zoning bylaws and understand it well. I said, well, what the heck do I have to do to rebuild my house just as it was? If I'm looking at the zoning directory, I'm not looking at maintenance.
I would say that you have other instances of that in the bylaw as well. I mean, I'm certainly open if you wanted to retire. I'm certainly not married to the title maintenance. If you want to call it something else that's more, that you think would be
Maintenance
more
and or
appropriate.
demolition.
That's certainly, I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I just think we misdirect the public. Brent's point is well taken. It does say demolition and moving C up into quote number 3 and A. Makes all the sense in the world. But we need to have more than maintenance on this section to invite people to read this section when they're in that position of a total loss for whatever the reason is, or a major loss.
So you're suggesting an additional word?
Maintenance,
Description?
maintenance and or demolition.
Yeah, any of that, or I would leave it to
Maintenance.
Tyler and Kevin's prerogative. If that be,
So-
to address the concept.
So if, my understanding is if we make minor changes tonight, then we can we can move this forward. If we send this back, we're gonna be back at it again.
Okay.
So
So
I would,
that's, and I'm not saying we want to get it right, but I'm also.
Yeah.
We've belabored this document for 3 years. And I think this is a good discussion. And I think some of the changes, we should make some
Minor.
changes.
I would be comfortable with a minor amendment with these 1 or 2 word changes that we've talked about.
Okay.
Maintenance
So-
and or,
Maintenance or demolition,
And-
shall instead of should.
okay?
Moving C, recreating that as 3 under section A.
Oh, the,
Would you,
Going back to the stormwater sentence, I mean, Jerry's comments, I mean, that sentence just brings up, I would be more comfortable having it struck. I understand, I hear why Tyler wants to include it. At the very least, we need to add notification of their enlargement to the zoning administrator.
so,
Thank-
so can I summarize that? So
Sure.
that everyone has an understanding of what we're looking at. So maintenance or demolition. Change shall. Landowner shall document the existing structure. Where the word meet is crossed out, change that to with. No changes of the if requested piece.
strike
I
that.
would strike if requested.
Failure to provide documentation.
Will require the applicant.
Okay, I kind of, I think if we leave that in there, it gives Tyler or gives the zoning administrator the option to pursue something, but if we get rid of if requested, it makes it mandatory that Tyler or his designated representative actually has to go out and and look at it. So I think for some of these minor like for like repairs,
I will say if the stormwater thing is giving you pause, I can live with that being struck. My main concern is really A.
Okay,
So I can live with that. Again, so if that's what you'd like to do.
okay, yeah, thank you.
so, okay, so that, I mean, that's my position on the if requested. I think that just takes a little bit of weight off of zoning and the planning commission.
What about if it said upon request?
And I would be okay with that.
Because again,
If-
just to avoid the gotcha.
I'd be okay with upon request in that. Is that? Okay. Okay, and then do you want to strike the stormwater or do you want to add to
I'd like to strike the stormwater.
the entire sentence? Stormwater drainage areas and culverts goes away.
Support that.
Okay, and then moving C to A3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is that,
I got it.
you got it? Okay.
It was there one more, that's maybe it's just my notes, but in A2. There was a question about
That's already Joe, 3:30.
but I got a note about who to submit it to the zoning. administrator.
That goes down to, that was part of stormwater drainage.
Okay, all right, good, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments about 435 right now? No other comments about third, so you got that one? You're good with that, Brent?
I'm good with it, trustees.
Yep.
Good, okay.
Do we need to make a motion to accept that as the
Think we-
new?
Yeah, I just think that we should ask both.
I
select board and
thought I
trustees before we
did.
make
Okay.
motions.
Well, I think probably not yet.
Not yet, but
Not yet, but.
gotta remember it all, okay.
You're saying, I'm saying to make a motion.
Yeah, and we
Yeah,
could do the whole hearing,
as
so-
presented.
All at once, okay,
This is-
okay, got it, okay.
Okay, is there anything else anyone on the board would like to address here?
I have one more suggestion. Under section 900, which is the definitions, under the definition of development, could we add the word demolition?
The kicker to that would be if you add demolition to it, it puts it in the definition of land development, and then land development you're required to get permits for land development. So then it's kind of like saying, you're kind of putting a contradiction in there, because land development requires a permit. You'd have to make another change in there to say that like maintenance is like exempt, there's an exemption section in 400. Whereas having that whole section as it is does that.
Okay, then I withdraw that.
Okay, any comments from the audience? About anything in the packet that's been provided? I would say that's where we're at, right? Yeah. Yeah, yes. Come to the microphone and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Ken Hedberg. I live on Silver Ridge Road, Morristown resident. Tyler didn't mention it in his summary, but I read in the News and Citizen, and Tyler and I had email conversations about it. Obtaining a permit to be able to park my camper on my property. I don't feel that's necessary to have to get a permit to park my own personal property on the property I own. I don't park it in my driveway. If I try to park it in my driveway, it would block access to my garage. So it would be parked behind my shed where I have 2 acres and it's out of the way. I don't think I should have a permit or need a permit to do that. And, you know, if I decide to move it from that spot to a different spot, do I need a new permit? It's very unclear. I just think it's an unnecessary need to require a permit to park my camper on my property.
Kevin, what section do you know? What Tyler?
I'm trying to find.
Okay, thank you.
That's what I marked.
I know it's, I've read it.
450, 50 maybe? That's a maybe. Parking and driveway requirements,
No, this is specifically small.
but we have different page numbers.
No, picture got the.
It's 488.
Yeah, 488.
Yeah, so what I can speak to right now
Here,
is
here,
that
here.
it's already a requirement that campers are supposed to be parked in driveways. So if they're not parked in driveways, technically already that's a zoning violation. Especially true, so what this is trying to do is to give people the flexibility of not putting it there, because what you want, what could be, where it can be tricky is if somebody puts a camper or mobile home, and then all of a sudden somebody starts living out of it, you know, it's not connected to municipal waters, which happens. This is trying to basically say if somebody's gonna do that, say, okay, you're gonna put it here and make sure that somebody doesn't do it. And then start using it as an Airbnb or a hip camp or some other thing like that. So this is already in the bylaw right now that you're not supposed to have campers that are not stored in your driveway.
Traffic Chiefly Copley Avenue in Morrisville. So are you saying they have to be in your driveway?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have to get a permit to have them in your driveway?
No.
Okay. So that was one of my questions, because my camper only sits in my driveway for 2 weeks. Excuse me, I'm gonna need the corner of your thing here. So this other question is about,
Kathy, if you don't speak directly in the mic.
yeah, I'm trying to find where's the window replacement, what page? Just have that fully open. So the other question too is, I'm having a new roof put on Wednesday, and I called you about it, and do I have to call the listers about it? Because you didn't tell me I had to call the listers.
Because that wasn't a requirement at the time. This is a new change being proposed tonight, so I deal with the bylaws as they're written and proposed. And that wasn't part of the original proposal.
So I still don't know how, because this is.
As of anything that you're dealing with now that gets changed tonight would apply to things moving forward. It's not retroactive.
This doesn't go into effect for, if we ratify this tonight, it doesn't go into effect for 21 days. So if you're having your roof replaced on Wednesday, it's well within the 21 days.
Okay, so then I'm gonna go to page, I have page 18, which it's under, your windows. All new windows excluding replacement windows shall be at least twice the size, blah, blah, blah. So I am gonna be replacing windows. One window, it's not gonna be an exact replacement as that is there, because the windows that are there now don't allow for an air conditioner. So do I have to get a permit if I'm changing this?
It's under the story, is it not?
Section, please.
Yeah, it's page 18 and it's in the section 207 historic preservation criteria, which only applies to buildings that are in the historic preservation district. So basically think basically Portland Street kind of along, they come from heading towards the school. So if your property isn't in that, you would not be.
Well, my property is on Copley Ave, so it is the school, but it's not historic.
Yeah, so we'd have to see where. I don't know exactly where your house is, I'd have to look at it on a map. But in this site, what I can say is that requirement only applies to the historic preservation criteria.
Okay, so I will say this not needing a permit is gonna be very confusing to a lot of people. And they, okay, I don't need a permit, I can do this, and then come out, find out later that you're saying they upgraded to a bigger culvert, but maybe they upgraded to too big of a culvert that it's gonna flood somebody else out.
Kathy, we struck that.
We just struck
We struck
that.
that line.
Okay. And my last question, don't we charge for permits?
We do charge for zoning permits, depending on what it is. Typically, for most zoning permits, we charge by square footage. So if you do, as of right now, if you do something that doesn't add square footage or isn't a change of use, the simple fee, it's a $15 fee to basically record the permit with the clerk's office. So if you're changing a use, like putting in a home business or doing some other thing that changes the use of the property, that requires a permit, additional square footage. If an improvement's over 150 square feet, that requires a permit. But if it's under that, and again, if you're like altering like the roof line of your building now, what I typically do is I only charge you the bare minimum to record it in the clerk's office today.
Then that's a $50.
Yeah, that's fair, yeah.
Well, I was just kind of like, they all add up, and if we're looking for revenue, we're removing revenue. So,
Yeah, fees are certainly an interesting topic of conversation, not something I'm really prepared to speak too much tonight.
I, Charles MacArthur, live on the Garfield Road. And I'm just concerned as far as the camper one, because if we knew this when we built the house, would have been fine. But we do not have room to park our motorhome in the driveway and still plow and everything. And it's been there, we've had a motorhome in that dooryard since '79 without any problems, so I'm just saying I'm against this. I wonder where it's coming from at this point. Okay, thank you.
So I have a question on that. So, not for you, for the zoning administrator. Thank you.
Give me 1 second, I'm trying to get back to.
Yeah.
41.
Okay, yeah.
What section is it?
48. So.
Actually.
I know.
So this is 488 right now. This is the bylaws as it sits today. Campers, recreational vehicles, sea boxes, stores shall be parked in a fine driveway, an approved campground, or an approved sales lot. Campers, recreational vehicles, sea boxes, and storage trailers shall not be used as dwelling units outside of the rules for primitive camp, but may be used as temporary dwelling units in conjunction with construction of the primary residence on the same lot. Said structure shall be hooked up to functioning water, sewer, septic facilities while being used as a temporary construction housing. and shall comply with section. This is again the 2023 bylaw. This is the one that's in effect today. Well, it used to be in effect 323C if parked in the flood hazard area. So right now, it's a violation to not have anything parked in a driveway today. What this does.
How many people are in
What,
violation?
sir, if you would, so what this does is give people the option to not have it be in their driveway and stored in their driveway, provided they get a permit to do it. Now, and it's also important to remember that zoning enforcement is done on a complaint-driven basis due to staffing constraints. To be equitable, when I do enforcement, I have to treat everybody more or less the same, right? So I have to have the ability, it can't be just that your property is visible and I can see your camper and RV, therefore I'm gonna come after you. Or somebody who lives, say, in Sterling Valley or up the road has the same situation, but it's not visible from the road. So it's trying to strike that balance. I know that there's campers that aren't parked where they're technically supposed to be right now. How I deal with that is through zoning enforcement. If I have a complaint about travel trailers, things being stored or occupied in the area where they're not supposed to be, I investigate and do zoning enforcement. What this is giving you is the option of avoiding that by saying, to your point, if you have constraints where you can't put it in the driveway, you can pull a permit to build a pad or whatever to store it in a location that's more appropriate.
Are you saying that if I go buy a camper tomorrow and I want to park it in my backyard, you're going to give me a permit when I come in and ask for it? Or what are?
It
your
would take 30
stipulations?
days to review and approve. Again, at a certain amount, zoning enforcement, the sort of stuff, there is a bit of a art to it. Right? So if I have somebody come into me in good faith trying to pull a permit to put their camper trailer on there and showing up tomorrow, right? I would probably be willing to work with somebody to find an arrangement that helps this make sense.
I guess what I'm asking is, are you gonna approve that permit no matter what? Or what is the guidelines as to whether that permit gets approved or not?
It would be if you supply a permit that says that it's here and it meets the standards noted there and you say it's not gonna be used as a dwelling unit, then yeah, I would be hard pressed to not approve it, provided it meets the setbacks and other standards.
And what would it cost for that?
For, in this instance, $15.
So, oh, sorry.
What if the neighbors objected?
Oh, then in that case, they can file a zoning, they can file appeal to the Development Review Board per the zoning bylaws.
Thanks.
So you're not done, Tyler.
No.
I'm trying to
So-
hog the microphone.
So is there a, like, in a specific instance, is there a timeline, a time limit to that? If you have relatives from out of state that are coming and they're camping and they're there for 4 days, or if they're there for 2 weeks while you're cleaning your camper, how do we manage that? And our neighbor complains on the first day that I park my camper on my lawn. What do we, I mean, there's got to be some,
Well, there's a definition of primitive and this is gonna be, I will caution about getting too deep into the weeds with any particular scenario, because zoning is so site and case specific. What I would say is there is provisions in here, if it's gonna be used as a dwelling unit, you can do it as a primitive camp, and primitive camp is defined by law as well.
but it's got a specific timeline for a primitive camp. It's like 30 days in a calendar year or something like that.
So, and this is not changed from the definition that is currently in the bylaw, in the 2023 bylaw, just to be clear. Primitive camp is a dwelling unit allowed in all zones where occupancy per the Vermont State Wastewater System and Portable Water Supply rules shall not exceed 3 people, and whose use shall not exceed 3 consecutive weeks per calendar year, nor exceed a total of 60 days per calendar year, that has no interior plumbing except for 1 sink with water. Primitive camps may contain a composting or incinerating toilet that does not yield liquid, provided its contents are disposed of in compliance with VT rules.
So what this rule does, I think, is it kind of takes care of Kathy's concern, because
He's only saying 3 out of the year.
no, 3 weeks consecutive,
Consecutive.
no more than 60 days. So that would take care of that. And Mr. MacArthur's $15 permit would also, and that permit is good for
It runs with the property.
eternity.
So
So,
if you want to,
okay.
I'm putting a dedicated pad to store my camper here in the off season or when I'm not using it, and that's where it's gonna go.
Okay. I think that's what these people are looking for, is clarification on that.
Yeah. No, Kathy Chafee, I don't think we have to pay, should have to pay for a permit for that. I mean, when you pay close to $4,000 or $5,000 for property taxes for 1/8 of an acre. That's kind of, you know, taking every penny we got out of our pocket to get a permit, but. My question to you is before the what year?
Kathy, you need to refer to me, please.
What year was it?
2023.
2023, so it was probably before that. But from the last zoning administrator, I was harassed, I was threatened by $200 fines per day for having my camper in the dooryard.
Again, my answer to that is zoning enforcement is complaint driven. And I investigate zoning complaints as they arise.
But if I put my camper in my dooryard for 2 weeks in
Point of
October.
order, Kathy, to the
If
chair.
I put my camper in the dooryard for 2 weeks in October and somebody complains, then
It's up to the zoning administrator and the town officials to investigate that complaint and see if it has any teeth. That's essentially what Tyler said.
But the rules are telling me that I have to have it there.
Again, these are about the proposed bylaws, but as it sits today, that is correct. It is supposed to be there as it's written in the bylaw. And I understand that you disagree with that, and I totally understand that point, but
Point of order.
that is what it says.
So,
It's not that I
Okay.
disagree with it, it's just it's so vague. That. Us with campers don't know what to do with them now.
Charles MacArthur again, just quick, so would the $15 be a one-time
that's,
deal continuously, and would it designate exactly where the camper's going, and if we wanted to move it, would we need another permit?
Again, I will note that, you know, it's difficult for me and I really try and avoid doing hypotheticals like this, especially in a public forum because zoning is so site specific. But as a general rule, assuming there is nothing mitigating why it couldn't be there, be it a wetland or some other thing or a setback or something of that nature, if it's in an area that doesn't pose any other violations with the bylaws, it can stay there. If you want to relocate it, you can do so. It would require a new permit because I have to document where it's going to go per the section. And again, the intent of it is to prevent people from storing a bunch of them and renting them out. And I get a lot of zoning complaints. You know, I do get complaints about the aesthetics of having campers and RVs parked right in people's front yards. It's on a list of things that I have to do. But again, enforcement is at my discretion and it is complaint based.
Would it be easier to? Would it be easier to do away with that and just say, if you have a camper on your property, it's found out to be a dwelling or somebody's in there line, then that's a violation and that can be reported and that can be acted on. So we're only looking at people so that way you can park your trailer anywhere. But then if it's being used other than camping or whatever, now it's violating the whatever it is, the amount of time you can dwell in there. And it just gets rid of that. Because that's the whole purpose of this is to keep that from happening, right? So to me, if somebody reports, hey, somebody's got a camper in their backyard and they're living in there full time, the power is hooked up to it, now they've got a legit complaint. But as far as just having a camper, I don't think we should be charging campers. I mean, that's to me.
Can I follow up? You do? So it's to your comment, but it kind of goes to Tyler. We're talking about using it as a dwelling, but if we're storing it for the winter, we've got a boat. It's on a trailer, we want to store it for the winter. It's not moving, no one's gonna live on it. You've got the same thing, you've got an RV, but for the winter, you're draining in, packing up for the winter. Are we talking about that as well as temporary dwelling or primitive camp?
That is correct. As it's written, and I will preface this by saying that I think I'm the fourth person to have worked on these bylaws. So some of these changes predate me and I didn't spend a ton of time personally dealing with them. I can speak to how I would interpret them. Again, as this is written, I say it shall be parked in a defined driveway. That's telling me is if you have a camper or a travel trailer, it is supposed to be in the defined driveway, not in the field or other area. Now, again, enforcement is complaint driven, and I do have some discretion to a certain extent with that. That being said, this is giving people the opportunity. The intent of this, I think, is to provide more flexibility than what we have right now, which is an unambiguous shall not. And saying that you can store them there. Here's how you do it. You need to get a permit to do so. And I think that makes a lot of sense. If you're going to permit where these go, is you should give people the flexibility to put them there. And if you want to treat them as structures, then a zoning permit, we could do that. And I would require more of a permit for the pad and location, not say the square footage of whatever your camper is.
And Tyler, I said a boat, and I realize it's not listed. Does a boat come under RV? I mean, doesn't feel like my definition of an RV.
I feel like we're getting a little bit with respect, Mr. Chair, into that really specific example. What I could say is right now is if somebody were to come and park a container, right, boat, it isn't explicitly mentioned in here, but that's one of those ones, does boat meet the definition of a trail? There's more of an involved conversation
Yeah,
than that,
So if
unfortunately.
right now somebody complained about a boat, you'd probably classify it under a storage trailer and then assess.
I'd have to really look at it. And again, I'm just not real, I can't really speak.
Okay,
intelligently.
thank you.
This helpful with more questions for.
Ken,
Well, we have a gentleman that's been, sorry, Richard.
Liberty Morrisville. So what you're saying is, so I'm in my own business, I also have a car hauler that I turned into a deer camp. It's portable. I also pay registration inspection for that to go down the highway. I also upgraded my pickup for registration. So that's almost an extra $1,000 a year that I pay. So I do plow. I do plow one of these person's driveways, and if there's a camper in there, then there's absolutely no room. And then I'm taking the risk of hitting that camper as well. If I hit a patch of ice, slide into it. So I guess the camper, the trailer. So I also have an 18-foot tilt deck that I park on my lawn. So are you gonna say that I gotta have a permit for that? Unless you wanna put a tent on it, then there's no sides on it. There's no roof over it. So I also got a couple more equipment trailers. Does that count as I've got to put a pad in across my lawn? I mean, where does this stop? I mean, you're talking about a boat now. I also got side-by-sides and four-wheelers, got trailers for that. So, are they considered a storage? Because I store my side-by-side in one? Am I gonna have to put a pad on my property that I pay taxes that I bought the property for? I mean, if I wanted to rent, and if I wanted all these rules and regulations, so I'd go rent from somebody. You know, because they're gonna say, hey, you can't do that, can't do this, can't do that. You know, I mean, where does this revenue search end? When it comes to, I mean, it's only $15, that per trailer, that per camper, that per lot.
What I can say to that is, you know, I certainly would view this as a revenue generating item. Again, all in all, I'm speaking to is what does this say? Right? So in my capacity tonight as a zoning, as a zoning administrator, I'm saying that how this would be interpreted, right? And again, I'm not necessarily saying that it's a good idea. I'm saying this, here is how it would be interpreted. It is worth pointing out that this rule is already in the bylaw today. So this is not a new phenomenon. Again, to what extent it has or hasn't been enforced is probably up to the discretion of the zoning administrator. That being said, is how I would interpret this is what is written here. If you want to store it off-site, that technically would require a permit and would require you to have that approved. If, again, enforcement is complaint driven, if there's a complaint filed about it, I will investigate it as I'm required to do.
I'd just like to say, I don't think anybody sitting here, I'll speak for the trustees as well, sees this clause as a revenue source in any way, shape or form. But
If I've got like 8 trailers, then I have to get a
Yeah.
permit for each one of them.
I don't think trailers is included in this, though, right? I mean, this is.
No, it's not.
This is recreational
Campers,
vehicles.
recreational vehicles, shipping containers like a Connex box. Or the storage trailers, again, like, if you have a job trailer, right, that has an AOT, it's a vehicle. Essentially, like you have a landscaping or a contractor, you have your tools in it, you take it to and from your job site. That wouldn't require a permit. If you're taking a bunch of shipping containers, right, and depositing them on your property, using them for storage or whatever, that's a horse of a different color a little bit. At least that's what this is trying to to say. Again, all I'm speaking to is, all I can only say is what I think the intent is and how I would interpret it. Now, this predates me by a long shot. It's been in the bylaws for not insignificant amount of time, be my understanding. And again, this is not a new, like today, but it's not the fact that, case that today you can put trailers wherever you want, and then tomorrow you can't. You're already supposed to. And anyways, this is more flexible, what's already in the bylaw.
I do think too. Situationally, this is very different. If you live in the village on a 1/4 acre lot or less. Or you have 10 acres of land. Where you're putting your trailer, your recreational vehicles, whatever. Is highly different for someone who might have 10 acres of land than someone who's. Right smack in the middle of the village, and now there's 3 trailers that have been, your trailers have all been dropped. On one of those flat sites.
Yeah.
That's kind of, again, a horse of a different color. So some part of this is, how much land is there? To put. These various trailers and RVs and whatnot. And I bet you wouldn't get a complaint from anybody who's got 10 acres of land from the neighbor, because they can't even see the dang thing. Never mind, they don't care where you put it. You put it right next to another house in the village that's relatively tight. Yeah, somebody drops a C box right there. You might have a concern, so I don't know how you deal with those two differences, but they are two realities, so.
I would say the majority of my complaints, what I can say are definitely of a more urban environment. Not always, there are some exceptions to that.
So if I wanted to put a Conex box, it was a little less than 150 square feet.
Brent, you gotta talk to me.
I don't need a permit, right?
It has,
Under the current zoning bylaws, if you build an accessory structure that is 150 square feet or less and is outside of the setbacks, that does not require a permit.
So that means that I could buy a Conex for 150 square feet or less, and I could put it on my property then, correct? Because that would be.
I would say, Mr. Chair, we are kind of straying into like some very, very specific data, and not that it's not interesting or important. I'm not necessarily sure if that's the best use of what you're trying to do tonight, which is to go through the bylaws, and I'll leave that to your discretion, but again, I would preface to say I generally try and avoid doing hypothetical conversations about potential projects without having anything in front of me to talk about. Because it is so zoning is, and this is a difficult thing with zoning, it's so site specific, and again, I could generally say, yes, you could do something on your property, then all of a sudden it's like, fine, your entire property is in a wetland for whatever reason. Well, that changes the conversation entirely. So I get where you're coming from, and they're all very good questions. I'm happy to answer some of them offline. That might be a more appropriate venue to answer some of those questions.
Well, I'm just kind of curious, I mean, because this is the bylaw that we want to change, we want to go through. I say we get rid of the damn thing.
Thank you, Brent.
And Jim Grover, Morristown. I disagree with this too, with the RV thing. Mine is parked in the driveway, it's not here in the winter, goes away in October. But I know Miss Chafee's sits next to the house. That's probably not a defined driveway. I also disagree with the permit process because that opens up an interested party anywhere to complain about that. I went through that 20 years ago. And it was a mess. I think you're opening up something, and I probably even know the 2 RVs you're complaining about. One's on Walton Road, sitting out in the field. I know of a couple others. I don't even know where that person is anymore. I just disagree with that part, it just opens up too much. I kind of don't fit in.
Jim, you gotta talk to me,
Oh,
please.
sorry. I don't fit into it because of my driveway, the business. My side yard is all driveway from the cars I put there, so.
Thank you.
okay.
I mean, if this is all up for interpretation, and I
You
understand.
gotta
that this-
your
oh,
name.
sorry. Ken Hedberg, Morristown, Silver Ridge Road. Um. Sorry, I lost my train of thought on that one. If this is still up for changing as well, maybe we remove, seems the point of contention is RVs and campers. I mean, I can understand the Connex box and needing that to be in a defined area, but the camper parking next to my house, or in my case, behind my house. What if we rewrite that so it's not including us? Because I had a boat trailer too, so now I'm paying $30 now because I'm getting a permit for a boat trailer potentially and a camper. I was not aware that this was in the zoning bylaws.
It doesn't say boat trailers.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
But
It says
when
campers, RVs, shipping containers and storage trailers.
Okay. I say we strike the camper and the RV section of it because now you're requiring permits. Like I said, I can't park it. If I park it in my driveway, I won't be able to use my driveway for getting vehicles in and out, so. And then am I in violation for parking vehicles elsewhere? I don't know. I'd have to look at the bylaws closely again for that, so. Maybe I implore the board to revisit this and maybe think about that more instead of just saying, oh, we'll just make a permit and it's hunky-dory, so.
Kathy Chafee, so Copley Avenue, so boats and snow machines are recreational vehicles.
I don't think that falls underneath the intent of that RV statement. It would be a motorhome.
And like this gentleman said that, we parked our camper on the side of our house, so the last rule we knew, it could not be in your driveway, it had to be behind the front facing of your house, or however you wanna say that. Did I say that right?
Behind the house.
Yeah, so it has to,
That's
yeah.
sticking out.
yes. So, I don't know, I'm all confused on this, there's just way too many, so I guess I'll just wait till somebody complains and then. Yeah, stupid phone call. But,
As a,
I've had to change you again, I'm not done, I'm leaving after this, so. I feel that we're turning Morrisville Village into an HOA. And I don't agree with that either. So. You need to look at a lot of other things, you need to look at the second house on Randolph Road that's engulfed in campers. On both sides of the house and in front of the road. If we're gonna look into things like this, we need to look into hoarder houses that have trash all over the place. So. You're picking on campers, but I think we have much bigger fish to fry.
thank you, Kathy. Any comments from the board about that? No?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess I do, Richard. I think it's really difficult to, I don't believe we should strike this. There are situations where I think this applies. But I think there are other situations where it shouldn't apply, and I think Tyler's. I don't know if the words of Tyler's mouth, but he's said multiple times, it's based on enforcement. If nobody complains about the whatever it is, trailer, hobby, Tyler's not out looking for trouble. He's gonna go out and investigate. If somebody says, I can't believe that Richard did this with his trailer, Tyler's gonna go look. He's gotta complain. It feels soft because there's a rule that's here and but Tyler's telling us it only gets addressed when there's a complaint. So the rule exists to subsection it into, if there's a complaint, I've got something to do. I've got something to refer to. I've got a document to read. I can, and Tyler again can say it complies or it doesn't comply. But most of the people who've spoken tonight and have some of these have not had a visit from Tyler or the predecessor from Tyler, because nobody complained. For the people that own that, they're saying, boy, now that it's out in the open, I don't like this. But in essence, Tyler said, it's been there all along and no one's come to complain about yours, Ken, or yours, sir. That's not a rule that feels very good. If you're sitting here making the rule. But I think as long as our zoning administrator, whether it be Tyler or anybody else, operates under the view that unless somebody makes a problem out of this, I got better things to do, basically, than run out, just drive around and look for where the trailer is and where the camper is and where the boat is. Under that assumption, I'm okay with this. Because I think Tyler needs to have the authority. That's my opinion to the rest of the trustees and the board members. As a zoning administrator, because I just believe that needs to be there. It's the enforcement piece that is the crux of this, is if that's what Tyler's simply using this for, then we need somebody to be able to do this and say that camper's in an inappropriate spot for whatever reason, or trail. But it doesn't, and I guess it allows somebody who wants to just be a problem to complain about any trailer or camper there is, but most people hopefully have better things to do than just give Tyler more work. So while I hear the concerns in the audience, and they're legitimate, by reading the letter of the law, they're absolutely legitimate. Part of me wants to say, if this law has been, this reg has been in place for multiple years, and basically Kyle's saying with a few changes, that's what we've lived under, and it hasn't been a problem, then my gut is to say we leave it alone. Unless it becomes a problem for people who have campers and trailers and RVs. And then we have to revisit the bylaw at a later date. But if it hasn't been a problem, then I personally think we just leave it alone and trust that Tyler will use his judgment to enforce this when necessary and obviously respond to any complaint. If the complaint is found to be unnecessary or unfounded, then it walks away and we're done with it. And it's not about the $15 or anything else. But for people who have these, it's of concern. And I think I understand the concern. I think we leave it alone and we trust Tyler's judgment or the subsequent zoning administrator around how this reg gets enforced. Thank you.
Anything from the.
Kevin Grover, Morristown. And I completely agree with what you said. Just to be clear, does that mean you're not gonna make people go get a permit? And hold everything the way it is as we speak?
I'm gonna yield because I'm not in a position to give that answer to you.
Okay.
The answer I can give you is that if you're storing a trailer and you don't have, and it's outside of the driveway and you don't have a permit for it, that is a zoning violation. Zoning violations are done on a complaint basis. So if they have received a legitimate complaint and it's stored improperly, it doesn't have a permit, that's technically a zoning violation, and I work with you to correct that violation. The vast majority of the time, and zoning enforcement is resolved before you get to any sort of large scale, action. Because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to get people to comply with the rules. I do understand the frustration around it, and from whether it's this or other sections of the bylaws, we do all have to remember whenever we approach this, is like right now we are staffed with one person who's also the health officer and among other things, right? So it's our ability to do robust enforcement of the nature you're talking about is limited due to staff constraints. That being said, that is as of today, that if a camper is stored outside of a driveway right now, technically that is a zoning violation. That's just what it's per the letter.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask a question? I don't want to beat this to death, but what's the intent of that?
Again, this predates me. My understanding of the intent of this is I do receive complaints of the aesthetic nature of somebody having a camper parked, let's say in the front setback or right in their yard in a residential area. People don't like looking for, again, this is difficult when anytime you're dealing with aesthetics or things of this nature, right? People don't like looking at them. They have a particular vision of what they want their community to look like. And for some people, a 32-foot mobile home or camper parked in somebody's yard isn't their idea of a neighborhood that they want to live in. So part of, and I will say, regulating campers and RVs is not unique to Morristown. A lot of towns do it. They do it in a variety of different ways. Some will just say they have to be screened. Some will require them that they're not visible from the road. So as long as it's not visible from a road, you can do that. If you're going to store them in a certain area over a number of time, you have to be on a pad. I've seen there's a lot of different, you could find 50 different ways to regulate them if you wanted to.
Thank you, Tyler.
Anything else?
Specific to these bylaws?
Specific to these bylaws.
I don't have anything specific to these bylaws. I will say that I have received conversations and conversations about folks concerned about what they call data centers. And there's been comment and questions as to if the town should do something regarding data centers. And so I think we need to talk about it because we're hearing comments about it. We certainly want to attract business and support business. We also have a responsibility to protect the environment and the health and wellness of our community. And some of these large centers do have an impact. So there's a variety of ways to address it. I fully support moving forward with these bylaws. I would suggest that we pass them if we can tonight. I think they're good with the one minor amendment to section 435 that we discussed. But I think we could also consider perhaps an interim bylaw that puts by statute, an interim bylaw is a 2-year bylaw, which we can vote on, and then it goes to the planning commission to do more research, to flesh it out, and we have another public hearing about it to then see if that's a bylaw that we accept. And because data center, I mean, there are small data centers. I'm talking about larger ones, things that take up a significant amount of electricity, a significant amount of water, noise that affects adjacent properties of butters. They may or may not create jobs. Most of them don't create a lot of jobs. So I do think that's something that I'd like to at least have a conversation about. And so I guess that's a question. Can we make a motion to approve these bylaws and then have a separate conversation? How do we need to
I think we can.
structure this?
I think if we had a motion for the bylaws as presented, and then if we'd like to proceed into further conversation around what we'd like to see the planning commission do.
Okay. Is that,
I think that's.
Yeah, I have a question on procedure. I guess with our two boards, is it just one motion and vote, or we have to have two separate motions, two separate votes? Make the
Yeah.
same motion. Yeah.
The protocol, as I understand it, has been, you've been here on the meeting, select board. And then the trustees, and they may be different in that case, then that would, but if they're the same, then it's good to go.
Get a motion. Anybody have any other discussion or? No. You have a motion there?
okay, I will make a motion to adopt the 2026 zoning bylaws with a minor amendment to section 435 as
Point of order, I think you need to close your public hearing first, if you're gonna do that.
Do we?
I don't think. Judy?
Did you open a public hearing? You did.
Do we need to close
So we
the
have
public
to
hearing?
close.
You can't, I believe Scott is correct.
Scott, you're right. Look at you go.
What?
So then.
All right,
Okay.
so then, but then,
Then you would take a motion.
but then we'd have to reopen it to have further discussion about.
No, you can have a discussion about what you want the planning commission to do in any
Okay,
session.
okay. Okay. So can I get a motion to,
I make a motion to close the public hearing regarding the 2026 bylaws.
I have a motion, I have a second.
Second.
I have a motion to close the public hearing. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have to do the same thing. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing on the 2026 zoning bylaws. I'll second it. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
It was.
Wait and make sure she catches up. All right, I make a motion that the Morristown Select Board adopts the 2026 zoning bylaws with a minor amendment to section 435 as presented.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'll make a motion to accept the 2026 zoning bylaws with the exception of with a change to section 435A.
I'll second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. I would just like to say thank you to Tyler and to the Planning Commission for their hard work on the bylaws, and thank you to everyone that provided comments.
If I may too, and I know there's people been talked a lot about trailers and stuff tonight. If you guys have comments, concerns that you want to send to me regarding way things that we could change this section, the subsequent bylaw amendment, I'm more than welcome to have that conversation with you. Also, planning commission meets twice a month, right in the same room. You're more than welcome to come in and voice those concerns and suggest changes. We'd be more than happy to look at.
Leah, would you like to pick up where you left off?
Okay. So, as I said, a number of people have approached me about concerns regarding data centers. And the concern is, well, that they're just moving so quickly. And in other parts of the country, they are being approved very fast, and municipalities really don't have the structure that they need in place to really talk about it and address it, and they're going through very quickly. And so people are fearful, and they're worried, particularly about the environment. There are 2 municipalities in the state of Vermont that have recently adopted a moratorium on, one says AI and crypto data centers, but they also call it a high impact use business. And they've, to kind of define it, they defined it around what the concerns were, i.e. electricity, use of electricity that becomes burdensome for the ratepayers, the amount of groundwater, surface water that's used, the level of noise, the amount of impervious surface that is created by some of these centers. And a moratorium, by doing an interim bylaw, it gives the town 2 years of protection to be proactive, to really investigate and look at what this could mean for our municipality, without having, it makes it proactive as opposed to trying to catch up. And I've only been on the select board since October, and the entire time I feel like we've been catching up. And so I'd like to be a little bit more proactive.
I agree with what you're saying, but I don't know if you're aware of it. Right now, Morrisville
is subject to rolling blackouts by ISO New England. We don't have the infrastructure to support one of those things, and I doubt we're gonna build it. And I don't think anybody's gonna build a big plant like that, knowing that some guy in Boston can shut it off whenever he wants to. So, I agree that these things aren't good for the environment.
Mhm.
But we can't. We can do that, but I don't see it doing any good,
Mhm.
because they can't do it anyway. They wouldn't build it here, because they wouldn't have the power. Unless
Green,
they want to build a power.
I believe in Royalton, where they did pass a moratorium, they did have testimony. I want to say, was it Green Mountain Power? I would have to look up in the minutes of their meeting. Green Mountain Power had identified 5 locations within the state.
Well, Scott can speak to that better than I.
Sure. But so just to give you an example of how Royalton defined it, was they defined, and they called it a high impact use organization or business. And that use is defined as consuming more than 20 megawatts of electric power, or using more than 57,600 gallons per day, which is about 40 gallons per minute, of surface or groundwater. If it contains PFAS, which is forever chemicals, in its wastewater discharge, or if it creates more than 20 acres of impervious surface, or emits 70 or more decibels of persistent noise audible to adjacent properties, or may create less than 10 permanent on-site jobs every acre of impervious surface, and or may strain community resources during construction. So that's how they defined high impact use, which I thought was a good way, because it kind of touched on all the concerns that people have expressed.
I'll just add that one of the things that's been happening is where there might be concerns about being able to access power locally, is they're bringing in diesel generators and creating their own power and noise pollution and air pollution as well. So I think we want to be proactive against that possibility as well.
How many kilowatts did you say they had to produce?
20 megawatts.
You get 20 megawatts on a diesel generator. It'd be bigger than this building.
They're using hundreds.
I like the idea. I mean, it's being proactive and, it gives you time for more research. Just because they have, I mean, those sound like good, guidelines, but who knows whether those fit our community or not. It would give time to people to do research and adjust if necessary.
Yeah,
I have no idea what 70 decibels is.
I agree with Bob, but 2 years, who knows what could happen? They could. So I think any chance we can create a buffer before something happens, I think we should take advantage of that. Because a lot of times I see complaints or people not happy with things after the shovel's already hit the ground, and at that point it's too late. So if we can have a chance to get ahead of it and just kind of give ourselves a little bit of leeway, I think we should definitely take advantage of it.
So are you suggesting that we use those guidelines that Royalton used and then put that to the planning commission to flush out? Is that what?
I'm suggesting it be an interim bylaw, which under state statute, I believe would go to the planning commission to do some research and flesh out, and then there'd be a public hearing. And then I'm not 100% sure how the interim bylaw works, but I would, yes, I think I would use Royalton's definition at this point, yes. For the planning commission to
Interim
consider.
bylaws are your creation. So
Okay,
you create the interim bylaws. And then we would, in that time, research and say, this is what we would recommend that we would do. You would have to have your own public hearing on that. And I would perhaps offer as a word of caution, because at the end of the day, these are your rules and I will enforce them. But bear in mind, right, I've come back to a capacity issue. It is a one-person operation. If you want to say tracking the number of jobs, measuring decibel levels, well, you need to buy equipment to do that. You need to how am I going to go out and track the jobs? There's going to be a lot There's a lot of stuff that you can put on paper it makes a good bylaw, but if you don't have anybody or capacity to enforce it, it doesn't really do you any good. So.
So if you're proposing that for tonight,
Mhm.
you're all considering it, can you just go over for the select board? You know, what the statutes say around if they were to have a motion. The warning period, number of days for warning, and then number of days it could be challenged. Are you prepared to provide that information?
I wouldn't be prepared to speak, because interim bylaws are they're done, but done very rarely in most cases. I would say is that you couldn't do it tonight because you didn't warn that, you warned a public hearing on the proposed bylaw. So you'd have to have a separate warning with its own hearing notice. You have to warn it 15 days in advance. It's a public hearing, and then you'd have to provide the text that you were proposing for interim bylaw, have a public hearing like you did tonight, and then you would have to do it. You can't propose it tonight. Because you have no text, you have nothing in front of you other than we're gonna use Royaltons, but you don't have the actual text. The public doesn't have access to the text. It wasn't warned.
If I put the text in a motion,
No, because the public hasn't had access to it.
okay.
It wasn't warned for that. It was warned.
No, I hear you, but I hear you. I'm processing, because we had a public hearing about our bylaws.
But this would be a major.
It's, yeah.
Yes, okay.
Actually, it's not.
No, it's not a major, it's separate,
an
it's separate,
It's
it's
a
not a
totally
major
separate
amendment,
issue.
it's a separate.
And that's the
From
problem,
bylaw.
because you didn't, if you would warn the 2026 bylaw and warned a conversation around an interim bylaw vis-a-vis, data centers or
Mhm.
whatever the topic happens to be, then I think you'd be okay. But because you didn't do that, you have to warn a separate public hearing to discuss that particular issue.
Okay, so if we draft something and then have legal review it, we could take it to a select board meeting and warn it that it would be a public hearing for said
Ideally adjoined.
bylaw, ideally a joint.
I
Public
would,
hearing for said bylaw.
and you certainly have the authority to do that in statute. I would say, and I think as we've kind of run, when we do things in a rush and I get the urgency, sometimes doesn't necessarily create the best policy. So one thing that our process does have, at least the planning commission process, that's much more of a deliberative process. There's opportunity to provide feedback from stakeholders. There may be some unintended consequences to what we're proposing that we don't realize. A couple things that came to mind with your uses. What about Butternut Farm? What about the breweries and stuff that we have in town? Are we going to accidentally catch up things that we're not really trying to catch up and things like that? And I can just tell you from the year I've worked on this, we just spent, a good chunk of our meeting tonight talking about trailers and how you define trailers and stuff like that. So it can be, you can get into the weeds with something very quick, and something that seems to be very, very simple and straightforward on the surface may not be, and may be very difficult to enforce and have unintended consequences. So I would offer that you have the right to do it. I would offer that as a word of caution.
The one thing about the interim bylaw that when I was reading through our options it is a 2-year. It lasts for only 2 years, and you do have an option to extend it for another year. So it's a way, if there's an urgent issue, a pressing issue, that the town can respond proactively so that it can do additional due diligence.
It could be written, I would think, not to impact current businesses. It would be new
Correct,
construction, maybe.
correct.
I support what you're proposing here. And in whatever way we can do this properly, but expeditiously.
Mhm.
I would really support getting on it.
Okay. So how? What?
You're gonna have to get it on an agenda
Okay, so do I need to make a motion?
No.
No, okay.
No.
And I also just want to clarify too, since we're sitting here together, that the select board has asked the planning commission, and they're working on it, to address the definition of incidental to construction and rock excavation. And you're also working on major subdivision if
Yeah, so we are, per your directives last time, we are in the process of drafting regulations around, as I think you know, you've been at a fair few of the meetings that we've had on that issue. I think we could certainly add this to the agenda item as it is a pressing topic. And I think, I think that, I would perhaps I think to Scott's points, like I said, I think it's certainly something that we wouldn't want to wait 5 years to regulate. I don't know, and I have not had conversations with anybody right now proposing a data center. There were some conversations in the past about battery storage or some storage, I think, for Morrisville Water and Light, but I haven't had any applications, nor am I likely to Scott's point, have one for this, let's say in the sixth, just to get it permitted in the amount of time. So the question would be, could we do a bylaw amendment in a timely way that's follows a more deliberative process than you guys putting it together in, essentially 30 days and warning it. Again, your prerogative. If that's the direction you want to do, you absolutely have the right to do that. But I'm wondering whether or not you could still, maybe we could be a little bit more deliberative of it and maybe catch some potential pitfalls in trying to do something quickly. That's, again, just word of caution.
Any other discussion?
Can I ask how the rest of the trustees feel? Sorry about that. Microphone. Trustees?
Well, I already spoke. I like the idea. What else?
I'm for it. I don't know if it's something that we could push to the planning commission to start the ball rolling. That way they have feedback. And then,
The issue is again, it's a certain point, interim bylaws are somewhat your show. So it's like, well, you can ask us to provide feedback. As are all of these bylaws, these are really your bylaws, right? We can provide feedback on it, but this is you guys saying that this is essentially an emergency. And that we cannot wait to go through the deliberative process that the planning commission takes to do this. Therefore, we need to act now to put a stopgap or something in place while we develop this. Which you have the right to do, but again.
And
Comments?
realistically, how long is the deliberative process with the planning commission? Because we just
3 years.
finished the 2023 bylaws, right?
So as far as the select board, we can have this on a July 6th, July 20th agenda item to discuss interim versus direct the planning commission. At that time, we can invite the planning commission to come in and talk about, realistically what they think they could research. You're talking about Royalton. We know South Burlington has some proposed. They could look at all that and possibly give you feedback at a future select board meeting so that you all, you're
weigh
communicating with
that.
the planning commission and you still have the option to move forward with interims. And then Scott and the village trustees, like you would, with the agreement we have, it would have to be a joint process.
Judy?
Thank you.
Josh? Josh?
Yep, sorry, just unmuting. I'll just offer my perspective as brief as I can. First of all, thank you for passing the bylaws, and the planning commission had nothing to do with it taking 3 years getting passed. We put them up 3 years ago. I'm so grateful that that is behind us. So thank you to both boards. I don't think there's any timeline that anyone could provide as to a deliberative process on this topic. We're crushing through at a pretty, voracious pace the earth extraction and subdivision concerns that are high atop the list. and getting to those, I just, I agree with Tyler's comments. That's as much as I'll say. And I'll just agree with Bob's comments as well. I don't think there's a market demand or even a reality of these things happening, which does not mean we should not be planning proactively. I agree with that 1000%. I think as a board, when the target moves and we are being asked to change our direction, it's really hard to have that appropriate deliberative process to do the work you're asking us to do. And to boot, we're already having conversations about us as a board reaching out for a town plan rewrite in 4 to 5 years. So it's a lot for a volunteer board that meets twice as much as most boards in the state meet. I don't want to all sing the same tune that we don't have enough time to do what we're doing, but we've got big work to do. That's my only comment. I'll just move on. But thank you again for passing these bylaws. I'm ecstatic about it.
Thank you, Josh.
One thing I would just point out, depending on how much bandwidth you wanted, I mean, just so that everybody needs to know this, but I'm gonna be out of town for the last week of June, basically July 1st, so I'm not really gonna be able to dig into this much before, but if you're gonna try and do it on the 6th, which I don't know what, if you'd like me to do it beforehand, I think that would be, I don't think I could get you something realistically before I would leave, just because of what I have going on at the moment. But we could certainly, if that's the appetite, if it's not June or July, I can highly prioritize that and look at Burlington or other similar municipalities and maybe give you guys some options to choose from or some language to think about.
Anything else?
I think I've said enough.
No, you need to say one more thing.
Oh, I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.